Hello everyone, it's Theme Park Avenue, I'm Eric, and I recently went to Six Flags Over Georgia to ride Twisted Cyclone. Overall, the park is a very solid lineup of coasters, and today, I'm ranking them all. Before we get into the ranking, please subscribe to the channel. In return, you will get plenty of new coaster content. Now, I should point out that I have been on all of these, some more recently than others, as on my last trip, 2 roller coasters at least were closed. And I'm going to start with the roller coasters I hate, then the family coasters I don't think are quite as good as the major ones, and then I'll get to the really good, strong, thrilling coasters, as I do prioritize thrills over everything else. And one last note, keep in mind this is entirely just my opinion, and I'm not saying these are the objective rankings, and I know some of them are very unique. And I just wanted to share my take on where each roller coaster ranks. Let's begin from the bottom. We have 11 coasters to get through, and number 11 is the Great American Scream Machine. This is an easy contender for the worst roller coaster of all time. I hear so many people saying, it's smoother now, it's better, the airtime makes it all worth it. That's just not the case for me. I think it is probably the most painful roller coaster, and the fact that it's very long and has large elements unfortunately does not help. It's just a really poorly thought out wooden coaster, and I feel like the fact that it's so rough is the main reason for that. I understand back when it was made, the park wasn't thinking, gee, how will this feel roughness-wise in 30 years? But the issue is, with such a large layout that I don't personally think is a lot of forces, that's the bigger issue. I get that's what a lot of classic wooden coasters kind of looked like, but this one just is not very well done, and it's not well maintained by the park, unfortunately. Where a lot of other old wooden coasters, even in the Six Flags parks, I just feel that they are handled a lot better than Great American Scream Machine. Number 10, Joker Funhouse Coaster. This is the kiddie coaster of the park, and I think, honestly, it's one of the best kiddie coasters out there. Queue theming is nice, and the actual ride itself is one of the longer kiddie coasters, with decent forces, a tunnel, a nice setting, and though there's not much else to say, it is a really good kiddie coaster. Number 9, Dalanaga Mine Train. I don't know how you actually pronounce that one, but we're going to stick with that. I'll call it Mine Train from now on. Mine Train is a good ride overall. I don't think it's nearly one of the strongest Aero Mine rides, but it has nice terrain and a really strong final drop. I don't think it's nearly as rough as a lot of people say. I think it's smooth, and the biggest issue with it that kind of holds it back compared to other Aeros is that it's much more meandering, and with the exception of the final drop, it really lacks strong forces. So while it is a fun, small ride, I do prefer the other roller coasters that provide more forceful experiences. Number 8, Georgia Scorcher. I used to hate this ride so much. I thought it was the worst stand-up coaster, except for maybe Green Lantern at Great Adventure. Now I think it is okay. I do find that there are parts of it that are quite bumpy, have headbanging, and this one does not have a lot of great stuff with the ride system. I don't hate stand-up coasters personally. I actually quite like the system overall, as I don't think it's quite as painful as some say, and it does provide a lot of forces. But this one does have its flaws. I think parts of it are smooth, and it is intense overall, but there are parts that I just don't enjoy all that much, which is unfortunate, but it is okay overall. It's not as good as some say, but also it's not as bad as it used to be. Number 7, Blue Hawk. Blue Hawk is a looping coaster that's very unique, for sure. I think the uniqueness is one of the things I like about it. I was surprised how smooth it was, but I believe it's a fixed version of a very bad Vekoma roller coaster. And now, it is smooth, and it's pretty fun. I find that it is surprisingly forceless for a roller coaster of what it is. It doesn't have a whole lot going for it. It just kind of is a fun, slow, interesting ride. And honestly, the quirkiness of it and looking at it from afar is a bit more fun than the ride itself. So it really is in the middle of the pack for these rides, where the top 6 are definitely stronger overall. Number 6, perhaps the biggest upset, is the Riddler Mindbender. This could have been higher. This roller coaster, back when I rode it in 2017, was in my top 50 until my last visit. It was a smooth roller coaster in 2017. It had great intensity, I love the setting and the terrain, and I thought it was really well paced. I'm not sure if I just remembered it really poorly, but it was not nearly as good this time around. After the first inversion, pretty much everything kind of goes downhill. There are some breaks that really slow down the pacing more than any other Schwarzkopf I've ever been on. There was surprising amounts of headbanging overall, which I don't experience on pretty much any other Schwarzkopf coaster. And these are not sustained headbanging. It's just brief moments that happen fairly often, so it's kind of jarring. And unfortunately, I just don't think this ride is as forceful as it used to be. I still love the setting, the inversions are good, but while this used to be above Shockwave and Montezuma's Revenge, it's not even close to that caliber for me anymore. I'm not sure what changed with the Riddler Mindbender compared to the old Mindbender, but they definitely made it worse, or it just didn't age as well as I remember. So overall, it barely earns its number 6 spot, unfortunately. On to the top 5. These 5, it was kind of hard to rank because I think they're all really great. But we'll start with Batman the Ride. Batman the Ride is a pretty strong B&M invert. Compared to the other ones I've been on 3 other Batman the Ride clones, I'd say this is one of the top 2 most intense for sure. I don't think it's my favorite one, as the feet dangling thing is a bit more painful with the intensity than on the other ones, which is something I don't usually complain about on an invert, but it is a good invert for sure. These rides are underrated, as I feel they are intense, well-paced, and have solid elements overall. I don't think it has the best layout of a B&M invert, and I do prefer the majority of others for just being a little more enjoyable, but that does not take away from the fact that Batman the Ride is a great invert, and this one is a very strong member of the Batman the Ride family. Number 4, Daredevil Dive. In my 2017 visit, pre-Twisted Cyclone being open, this was my second favorite ride in the park. What changed? Well, I feel that the first half of this ride is perfect. Forceful, fast, holds its speed incredibly well, interesting elements, I like it a lot. The brake run, unfortunately, slows down the ride quite a bit, and it never builds its speed back up, unlike something like a dive coaster, which really does get its speed back up for the final parts. That said, I do love Daredevil Dive. I think it's the best Gerstlauer I've ever been on. It holds its speed well for the first half, and if everything was like the first half, I think it would probably be 1, maybe even 2 spots higher. Number 3, Superman Ultimate Flight, the flying coaster. I'm a sucker for flying coasters, and I think this one is really underrated. It's just a strong ride. The pretzel loop is one of the best elements in the entire park. You really get pushed back into your seat. I like the flying system, and I feel that even though this ride is mostly turns and not a whole lot of interesting elements, it holds its speed strong enough, and you're in such a graceful, interesting ride system that I don't mind too much. The inversions are the highlights, and if there was maybe 1 or 2 less turns and 1 more inversion in its place, this would be a really strong flying coaster, right up there with Manta and Tatsu even. For now, it's a bit below them, but that does not mean it's not a great roller coaster, because it really is excellent. Alright, top 2. You already knew which coasters were going to be in the top 2, but which one comes out on top? Number 2 is Twisted Cyclone. This was fairly close, and I am the only person in my family who liked number 1 more than this one. This is definitely, of the 5 RMCs I've done, my least favorite. It is still a great roller coaster, but I do prefer the other 4. This one, let's talk strengths first. It's pretty strong in terms of forces. I think all of the inversions are really good. I think there are some airtime moments that are right up there with Steel Vengeance. Solid mix of floater and ejector overall. It is very smooth like all RMCs. And even though it doesn't have a whole lot of creativity apart from the first inversions, it is good. The weaknesses of this ride, there are 3. The first is, unfortunately mainly compared to other RMCs, The pacing is off. Some parts just feel really slow, and that does kind of take away from the ride overall. Another issue is that this one is short. Shorter than number 1 on the list, shorter than other RMCs, or at least feels that way. And unfortunately, a shorter ride does typically mean there is a little less going on, a little less to enjoy. And then the other issue, unfortunately, is just that this one does not have the same forces as number 1. The really only reason this is not as good as number 1 is because I like number 1 better. It's not any fault of this ride with the exception of maybe the pacing part, but I think Twisted Cyclone is very strong. It's very close to my top 20, if not in it, but all of the other RMCs I've been on are much higher, as I do prefer them, but overall Twisted Cyclone is still a great roller coaster. But, as many of you figured out, number 1 is Goliath. Without a doubt, the best Goliath I've been on. Do bear in mind I've only been on 3 total, but this is the best one. And it does get an edge over Twisted Cyclone. In terms of my ranking overall for roller coasters, they're probably separated by a good 7, maybe 10 spots. Goliath is my 3rd favorite B&M Hyper, behind Mako and Diamondback. And honestly, Goliath does everything right. It has easily one of the best drops of any Hyper or Giga coaster. It has fantastic airtime, both floater and ejector, and it spaces it out well, starting with large floater hills and after a very intense helix, going into the ejector hills. It's not the best B&M Hyper, but it is in my top 15 roller coasters I've ever been on. It's just incredibly strong. There's nothing wrong with it. It's a great Hyper. Not much else to say, I just really enjoy this one. And if you can only ride one roller coaster at Six Flags Over Georgia, I would definitely say go straight for Goliath. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this ranking. Comment your thoughts on Six Flags Over Georgia's roller coasters down below. Subscribe to the channel and like the video if you enjoyed. I'll see you next time.